Imagine the delicate gears of a luxury Swiss watch, tiny, precise, and flawless. Now scale that idea up until those gears must carry the power of 30,000 horses, non-stop, at 35,000 feet. Pratt Whitney dared to try, promising quieter skies and cheaper fuel. But with billions of dollars and the future of air travel at stake, one question remains. Was this brilliance, or a gamble too far? The late 2000s were a battleground in aviation. Airbus and Boeing, locked in their eternal duel, faced a new kind of pressure. Fuel prices were climbing relentlessly, governments were tightening environmental standards, and airports were imposing strict noise limits. Airlines, caught in the middle, demanded a new generation of aircraft, jets that could fly farther on less fuel, operate more quietly over crowded cities, and slash operating costs. Boeing's answer was evolutionary. The 737 MAX would stretch the life of its venerable narrowbody, paired exclusively with CFM International's LEAP 1B engine, a safer, incremental step. Airbus chose a different path. By re-engineering the A320, it could seize the moment. Thus, the A320neo was born, and with it, a choice: the conservative CFM LEAP 1A, or the daring Pratt & Whitney 1100 geared turbofan. The GTF was not just another engine, it was a reinvention. For decades, geared fans had quietly powered business jets like the Learjet 35 and regional jets like the BAE 146, but those engines produced 5,000 to 7,000 pounds of thrust. To scale that idea up to an A320 would require more than 30,000 pounds of thrust, a leap an order of magnitude greater than anything that had come before. Pratt's engineers built a gearbox capable of transmitting over 30,000 horsepower continuously, with gears cut to tolerances finer than a human hair. On paper, it was perfection. Up to 16% less fuel burn, dramatically lower emissions, and noise reductions of nearly 75%. Orders flooded in. By 2015, the A320neo had secured over 4,000 sales, with more than half choosing Pratt & Whitney's radical design. But innovation does not forgive mistakes. When Airbus launched the A320neo, the world expected progress. What few expected was just how strongly Pratt & Whitney's geared turbofan would step into the spotlight. And in the years that followed, it became the symbol of ambition for airlines that wanted to fly more efficiently, more quietly, and more responsibly. By early 2018, the numbers told a story of balance and credibility. Out of thousands of A320neo orders, nearly half carried Pratt & Whitney engines. Roughly 45% of the market had placed its trust in the geared turbofan, a staggering achievement for a design that, only a few years earlier, many believed was too radical for commercial service. Among the earliest and boldest believers were the airlines of India. In 2012, Indigo stunned the industry with a record-shattering order: 150 A320neos paired with 300 Pratt & Whitney 1100G engines. It was a declaration that India's largest low-cost carrier would bet its future on this new propulsion system. 4 years later, in March 2016, Indigo proudly took delivery of Asia's first A320neo powered by Pratt & Whitney, ushering in a new chapter for aviation across the region. Not long after, Go Air, later rebranded Go First, added its own voice of confidence, selecting the geared turbofan to power 72 A320neos. Together, these commitments made India one of Pratt & Whitney's most important proving grounds. But the story was not confined to South Asia. In Europe, Lufthansa stepped forward as the launch customer, flying the first 1100G powered A320neo in January 2016. Soon after, Spirit Airlines in the United States began reporting fuel burn savings that exceeded even the promised benchmarks. From Iberia Express and Taipei in Europe to HK Express, China Eastern, and China Southern in Asia, the list of carriers embracing the geared turbofan grew steadily, cutting across regions, business models, and operating environments. By the end of the decade, Pratt & Whitney's engines were not merely competing with CFM's LEAP, they were shaping the identity of the A320neo itself. In less than 10 years, the geared turbofan had transformed from an audacious gamble into one of the defining successes of modern aviation. Its share of orders, proof that innovation could win hearts, contracts and markets. Early A320neo deliveries ignited headlines and hope, but within months, the honeymoon gave way to a worried drumbeat from the flight line. Ground crews nursed engines through extended warm-up procedures to prevent thermal bowing. Captains waited 3 uneasy minutes at idle before pushback. Maintenance teams chased nuisance messages. What had dazzled on paper was now fighting for rhythm in daily service. The first public flashpoint came from Doha. Qatar Airways' Akbar Al-Baker rejected early A320neos outright, saying the Pratt Whitney engines had a lot of problems and were not adequately tested, especially for the Gulf's heat. He warned he might switch to CFM. Pratt Whitney, for its part, said it was already installing fixes to address the issues. The standoff set the tone. Uncompromising airline expectations colliding with a young engine wrestling real-world complexity. Lufthansa, the launch operator, reported teething issues of its own. Crews coped with the longer startup regime and software refinements, while engineers worked through rotorbow mitigation and FADEC logic updates. Aviation Week documented those early constraints in stark terms. A mandatory 3-minute idle to let temperatures equalize so blades wouldn't rub, plus incremental software and hardware tweaks to tame vibrations and false warnings. By early 2018, worry hardened into formal action. After a string of in-service events on specific engine build standards, Europe's regulator issued an emergency airworthiness directive. It flagged an increased risk of in-flight shutdown on certain Pratt Whitney engines from a defined serial number range and, critically, yanked ETOPS for aircraft with 2 affected engines until inspections and fixes were complete. A few weeks later, India's DGCA grounded 11 A320neos at Indigo and Go Air after serial incidents. An extraordinary step that rippled through schedules and balance sheets. The Indian story didn't end there. After 4 engine-related shutdowns over 3 days in October 2019, the DGCA ordered Indigo to replace every affected 1100G engine by a fixed deadline, even urging deferral of new aircraft deliveries until re-engining was done. It was decisive, disruptive, and a loud signal to every stakeholder that reliability had eclipsed efficiency as the metric that mattered most. Then came the aftershock years later. In mid-2023, Pratt Whitney's parent RTX disclosed a powdered metal manufacturing anomaly that could seed microscopic fatigue in certain rotating parts. About 1,200 of the 3,000 engines built from 2015 to 2021 needed to be removed and ultrasonically inspected. Regulators followed with airworthiness directives expanding inspection scope and cadence. Airlines braced for months-long shop visits, with RTX warning of a high number of aircraft on the ground through 2026 as the fleet cycled through repairs. The operational and financial fallout was immediate and visible. Wizz Air, one of the geared turbofan showcase customers, reported 47 aircraft grounded by May 2024 and warned of more to follow as inspections ramped. CEO Yosef Varadi spoke candidly about capacity cuts and the need for a stronger maintenance partnership with Pratt, even as he expressed confidence the next iteration fixes would turn the corner. Spirit Airlines' Ted Christie called the added groundings another disappointing development, tallying aircraft out of service from both unscheduled removals and the new inspection wave. Across boardrooms and ramps, the tone ranged from strained patience to open frustration. India saw the sharpest confrontation. In May 2023, Go First filed for bankruptcy protection, asserting that chronic GTF shortfalls and delayed engine supplies had idled much of its A320neo fleet and crushed cash flow. Pratt Whitney countered that Go First had a long history of not meeting its financial obligations, disputing the airline's narrative even as emergency arbitration ordered Pratt to provide spare engines. The dispute spilled into courts and headlines, emblematic of how an engineering saga had morphed into a high-stakes commercial and legal war. Through all of it, Pratt Whitney kept issuing technical countermeasures, revised combustor hardware, seal and bearing improvements, fan and low-pressure spool system updates, upgraded software, and then the broader powdered metal inspection regime, while telling operators the reliability curve would bend upward. Regulators Regulators, meanwhile, tightened oversight with successive FAA and EASA directives that mandated angled ultrasonic inspections of HPT discs and related parts, replacing components when needed and progressively widening the inspection net as metallurgical learnings came in. It wasn't the calm, linear maturation once hoped for. It was a hard public climb up a reliability slope, audited in real time by authorities and airline CFOs alike. After years of painful inspections and grounded jets, the question hanging over Pratt & Whitney's geared turbofan is simple. Does this technology still define the future, or does it fade into a cautionary slide in aerospace history? The signals in mid-2025 are complicated, but they're finally pointing in one direction: survival first. Start with the money, because money buys time. RTX, Pratt's parent, has kept the lights bright. Second quarter 2025 results show Pratt & Whitney sales up double digits year over year and adjusted operating profit growing even while it booked fresh charges tied to a customer bankruptcy and ongoing compensation. But the real pivot isn't cash, it's hardware. At the Paris Cycle this summer, Pratt unveiled Hot Section Plus, a 35-part retrofit drawn from the newer GTF Advantage core, promising roughly 90 to 95% of the Advantage durability benefit and nearly double time on wing for baseline 1100G engines. That is exactly where the fleet has been hurting. Installations begin at regular shop visits, which means no special teardowns or long waits for custom slots. In parallel, the full GTF Advantage configuration itself cleared FAA approval earlier this year after an endurance program that ran more than twice the baseline testing load. Capacity is the next choke point, and Pratt knows it. The GTF MRO network has expanded to roughly 20 shops across 4 continents, with new muscle from MTU Aero Engines and Delta TechOps to lift annual overhaul throughput, and Sanad joining to add Middle East capacity. Add in a 40% expansion at West Palm Beach and a new long-term ITP Aero facility in Spain that becomes the network's 21st GTF center. Speed matters inside the shop too. This spring, Pratt introduced additive manufacturing repair flows aimed at cutting certain component repair times by more than 60% and recovering parts that would otherwise be scrapped, crucial when powdered metal inspections keep pulling engines early. Airlines aren't just waiting, they're still ordering. Wizz Air doubled down in June, selecting GTFs for up to 177 additional A321neos on top of their existing GTF fleet, with a parallel commercial support package running through 2026 to bridge grounded capacity. Spirit in the US extended its compensation plus support deal through 2025 to stabilize liquidity as shop visits cycle through. There's still a shadow. Regulators keep a tight lens on powder metal era hardware. The FAA's spring directive widening inspections to Pratt & Whitney 2000s on legacy 757s and C-17s shows how aggressively authorities are managing similar metallurgy risks across fleets, and why airlines will keep living with bore scopes and disk life limits for years. That vigilance is part of the recovery story, not a contradiction to it, and by late 2024, independent data tracked the AOG peak around the GTF fleet, an ugly, expensive peak, but a peak nonetheless, with the curve trending down as engines rotate through shops. Will Pratt & Whitney make the GTF a global success? The next 18 to 24 months will decide. The survival case rests on 3 pillars: get the HS Plus retrofit and Advantage hardware out at scale, keep adding MRO capacity until turnaround times normalize, and hold airline confidence with transparent support and predictable compensation. The early signs are tangible. Orders are flowing, upgrades are defined, and shops are hiring. But credibility returns only when time on wing doubles in real service, not just in test cells. If they miss, airlines will remember the groundings longer than they remember the fuel savings.